We are coming to you from ACS's Reimagination Thought Leaders Summit 2018, the lovely Melbourne Exhibition and Convention Centre. Just quickly, Reimagination, all about bringing leaders from the political sphere, the corporate sphere, academic, social as well, bringing them together, crucially, not just to become aware of some of the changes, the rapid innovation and technology of the future, but also trying to find the opportunities, particularly for Australia. And I'm very pleased to welcome the President of ACS, Johan Ramasundaran. Thanks so much for joining us, Johan. Look, a great setup. Congratulations. But just got to start with, firstly, the purpose. I mean, this is an annual Thought Leaders Summit. What are you hoping to achieve from Reimagination?
Absolutely. Thanks, James. The idea is, like you correctly said, we need to bring the thought leaders and we need to learn from these people. So we've been able to attract not just the national but also international thought leaders to learn from them, and two, for us to actually inspire a sense of purpose. Because as you know, the technology evolves at a really rapid rate. And the important thing is, how do we actually use? There's no real purpose. I mean, individually we might have a purpose, but there's no real collective purpose. And people need to be not enslaved by technology, but be able to command technology. And for us to have those discussions, and also the ethical dilemmas that we could be facing at the wake of these emerging technologies. It's important to have those discussions, and we're pleased to have over 1,200 people attending. And the way that we have is, we have from the C-suite to the students as well. So what we do is we also bring in about 200 students, and that's our way of connecting all parts of the ecosystem, because the questions, you can't just have these sort of summits just with the leaders alone. Yes, there's a place for that, but we need to bring everybody together so students can learn, but also the intergenerational learning. And the C-suite also needs to learn and have the conversations with the up-and-coming students.
I've listened to you speak a lot about collaboration, and again this morning kicking off the summit. It's fascinating to see the level of collaboration under this roof. You're talking about intergenerational, from all walks of life, all different industries. But what about being able to replicate that on the outside, where the real-world decisions are being made? Are we seeing enough of it?
We are seeing it, and we have pockets of excellence. So, but to answer your question, I don't think we see enough of it. We really need to replicate it when we walk out of this leadership summit, because without collaboration, I mean, you look at the academia, you look at the commercial enterprise, you look at the others. So how do we actually try and get them all together? That is the one of the most challenging questions. So we, as the ACS, the Professional Society for IT Professionals, we try to do our bit in terms of every event that we organise, every initiative. We try to bring and connect the whole ecosystem together.
Because there are big changes coming. I mean, I know one of the big focuses today is on the idea of the fourth industrial revolution, something which I know a lot of the speakers are going to be talking about. Significant change. Nobody is going to be spared from that. I was listening again to your opening address, and one line in particular struck me about divining a way forward for the fourth industrial revolution. Just explain that.
So the reason why I thought I'll use the term divining a way forward is, again, there's no collective mindset as to where the future is going, right? So we could have a few, I mean, different people will have different futures as me like, but what I really believe in is, we create our future. And how do we create the future? And especially with emerging technologies. I compare, let's use artificial intelligence as an example. So if you look at that, it's no different to if you look at a physical object. And I try to sometimes compare it to either fire or a knife, right? So a knife is a very important tool for as a cutlery, to do surgery, to do many good things. But also in the wrong hands, with the wrong mindset, it could be used to harm people or others. So artificial intelligence is no different, or any of the emerging technologies. So you've got to make sure you use technology with greater purpose, and more consciously to make sure that we do it for greater good of humanity and the world.
Johan, really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Great to be here.
There are a number of thought leaders here on the panels and giving keynotes at this year's Reimagination. And one of the most eagerly anticipated was Lindsay Scott. She gave the morning keynote and she has quite the diverse CV: model, actress and software developer.
When I was about 12, I started coding games on my TI-89 graphing calculator just for fun. And at that time, I never thought of programming games on my calculator as programming. But as I went along, and in college I discovered a computer science course, then I realized that the logic games I used to love and play with as a kid were so central to the computer programming that I would do later.
It's not often you see a bio line that has model, actress, app software developer. How did it all come about and how busy is your day-to-day life?
Well, I majored in theater and computer science in college, so at the time I knew that I wanted to act. I ended up transitioning into modeling. When that took off, I put the theater and computer science aside until a couple of years ago when I realized that I can act and use my programming income to support that endeavor.
What is the attraction for you when it comes to the computer science, when it comes to the software development? What is it that gets you excited?
I've always had fun programming. It feels like a game to me. It's a logic game, and I love dealing with elements of the UI and the animations. I like thinking about the concepts behind things, the data structures, the algorithms, and trying to formulate ways to do things as efficiently and well as possible.
Is there anyone you look towards? Is there anybody out there that could be across industries, or that you draw inspiration from?
Yeah, my father was a computer programmer in the 70s, and I didn't realize that as a kid, but he worked for the government, and he worked at a time when, as a minority, he wasn't the typical programmer, but even before then, in the 1950s, he was living in a county in the United States where the school shut down, because the black school shut down because of segregation. The city that he was living in, the area he was living in, decided to shut down schools instead of integrating. So he had to fight hard for that education. He ended up eventually, both my parents ended up at Harvard Business School, and I think because of him, education's been so important to me. And he passed away actually last year, about a year and a half ago. We were very close, and he was very kind and understanding of people. So I try to take all of that with me, as well as that drive he had to achieve.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to get the perspective of the board when it comes to, well, disrupting yourself.
Once in a while, not every decade, not every career, but about once a century, a technology or a set of technologies comes along, and it's so powerful that it rewrites the business playbook. It actually changes the guidelines, the playbook for running a successful business, for succeeding out there in the marketplace. For example, the right way to run a factory, the smart way to run a factory in the era of steam power became a really bad way to run exactly that same factory once electric power became available. And what Eric and I believe, what we've observed from looking around over and over, is that we are at a similarly big change point in the world, in history, and that the way that some of the smart things that we've been taught, the right ways to run a company, the advice that we've been given, the playbook that we've been working from, it's not just that it's becoming out of date. I think the problem is deeper than that. I think that playbook is actually becoming actively wrong, actively counterproductive, in some pretty fundamental ways.
Welcome back to Reimagination 2018. You're just hearing a little bit there from Professor Andrew McAfee talking about how, well, new rapid changes in technology are consigning old business advice and practices to the past. Well, speaking about businesses, how do you confront this rapidly changing environment, particularly from a board perspective? Well, Peter James is, well, on a number of boards, including the likes of Nearmap and Macquarie Telecom, and I spoke to him a little earlier.
A couple of areas to look at change and the way I encourage boards to look at it. And usually the best place is to start with the customer. What does the customer want? What problem do they want solved? And yes, it's great to look at disruption, and I'll come to that in a moment, but perhaps a good place to start is inside the company and what the customer journey is. So I know at Macquarie Telecom, which is a telco, we take the view we're un-telco. We focus on our customers and we're constantly reinventing, we're innovating inside the company to make each step of the company journey more efficient, more frictionless, more autonomous. And then we measure that all the way through that journey via Net Promoter Score. That is, what does the customer think of the billing cycle? What does the customer think of if there's been a technology issue? What does the customer think right across the journey? So first place I encourage boards to look at is inside the company and focused on the customer journey. The next place, of course, you mentioned about disruption. And boards have constantly got to be aware of what's happening in the world around them. And these days in the connected world, our competition and our customers can be global. And we talked about it on the panel. You know, you could be competing with a team that's in Bangalore, in Silicon Valley, in Helsinki. You know, we are in a global world, so I encourage boards to travel. And again, on a number of the boards that I'm on, we get on a plane and we go over and just talk to people, look at models, and then bring them back and say, what's likely to disrupt us? How much time have we got? And then what do you do about it? So that ultimately you may have to disrupt yourself. But again, that's a challenge, given most of the businesses we're involved in are ASX listed. You've got short-term challenge.
So just on that, it's a wonderful point. It's all very well to say, you know, disrupting oneself and looking at what you need to future-proof the business. But in the listed space, is there an extra layer of complexity around being able to actually do that?
Absolutely, and that's the yin and the yang of it, because we're all accountable, as we should be, to our shareholders. US 3 months, us here no more than 6 months, and it's a question of taking enough money, enough resource, and also the right culture that's going to be brave, because if you don't disrupt yourself, if you don't start to eat your own lunch, you know that someone else is going to do it to you.
The idea of culture, you made mention with Macquarie Telecom, you know, constantly reevaluating what you're doing, constantly innovating. If you don't start that way, can it be quite difficult to adopt that kind of a culture when you've been doing what you've been doing for decades, for example?
Exactly, and I'm a huge believer in culture, and we talked about it in mindset, and it starts at the board level.
Yeah.
Having this inquisitive, challenging, it's almost an itch that you're constantly wanting to scratch, and just recognising that what got you your success to date in today's world is highly unlikely to be what will get you success in the future, and constantly looking for better ways, new ways, and for threats.
Pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, James.
So it's one thing to have a strategy as set and handed down by a board, but what about implementing that? Well, that generally is the role of the Chief Information Officer. That person assigned with looking after the technology, developing the technology to keep future-proofing the business. Tabcorp, as you might or might not expect, very reliant on technology, and we were lucky enough to speak to Mandy Ross, the Chief Information Officer for Tabcorp.
Well, technology plays an absolutely mission-critical role in our operation. If you think about it, our lotteries business as an example, we sell tickets in a lottery draw, and we do that many times a week to many households across Australia. All of that technology, even the ticket itself, is digitised. You know, our product is a digital product. Then if you move to our wagering business, if you have a punt on a race or a sporting event, again, you know, the odds, the way we manage the odds for those events, and then the product itself is a bet in a digital form. So everything we do at Tabcorp has technology front and centre.
And how much of the software, the hardware, the technology that underpins all of that is internally driven versus being able to outsource or actually, you know, pick something up off the counter sort of?
Yeah,
measures?
well, these, I guess the core parts of our business are everything to us, and so we treat them as our crown jewels. So our wagering technologies, the proprietary technologies that we have, and the same with our lotteries business. So what we have done historically is develop a lot of that IP in-house. So yeah, we have a really significant engineering team, technology teams, over 1,000 people here based in Australia, developing our own IP that can stand up to $100 million Powerball, or next Tuesday's Melbourne Cup, where we'll be processing 15 million bets.
Wonderful to have you join us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Krista Jones has travelled out to Reimagination 2018 from Toronto, where she works at the Mars Discovery Precinct. It is a new way of thinking how to harness the changing environments of technology and finding the successful business practices that is going to lead to future success. They have a very ambitious plan, if you like, taking entrepreneurs, those successful ones, and shaping the future. I spoke to her a little bit earlier about just how to go about doing that. But firstly, just what exactly the Mars Discovery Precinct actually is.
So the Mars Discovery District is North America's largest urban innovation hub. We're a not-for-profit that actually is housed in 1.5 million square feet in downtown Toronto. And the purpose behind our organization is that we help innovators change the world. And we do that by focusing on the growth of high-growth firms in science, technology, and social innovation.
Now, you're here talking about, or on a panel talking about, one of the big topics of discussion, the idea that the fourth industrial revolution. Now, I noted the World Economic Forum describing it as a relentless advance of technological breakthroughs that bring the physical, biological, and digital worlds closer than ever. How do you succeed? What does it take to succeed in an environment like that?
So, you know, it's really interesting, right? Because it is coming off the third industrial revolution, I guess, since we're entering the fourth. Organizations and everything had a very similar look. You had similar structures, you had similar concepts, you all did things, and you just kind of, you know, how innovative your product was really what allowed you to be successful. In this next wave, with the pace of change that's happening, there's not a destination we're heading towards. So what is going to be successful are those who are actually able to harness and live inside a world of constant change. So we need to change the structures of our organizations, the structures of our education, the structures of how we think about problems, and bring these various streams together. So you get biologists and technologists, you get business people and creative, and you start to bring it together such that you're all on a constant change journey to keep it in pace with this change.
Just finally, for others to adopt it and to get that mindset, generally are going to be able to see success. Are you getting that? Are you being able to say, look, here is what we're actually being able to achieve by taking on this mindset, taking on this new way, if you like, of skills and approach?
So the proof is in our numbers, right? So it's really about, we've gone out and we've tried to gather the like-minded people, the people who know it's coming, the people who are willing to change, and the proof is actually just in the results we talked about earlier, because it's hard to argue when you've got companies that have generated $1.3 billion in revenue that there isn't a market for change.
Very, very true. Krista Jones, appreciate you talking to us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the key elements of this summit is the idea that it brings thought leaders from just about every walk of life. You've got academics here, you've got corporate leaders here, social leaders, but crucially, government leaders as well. What are they doing? What is the regulation? What is the legislation? What is the future framework to help try and facilitate the changing nature of the economy that we're going to need to remain globally competitive? Well, we spoke to a host of politicians across the political divide to find out just what the plan is.
Being optimistic does not necessitate ignoring the anxiety that exists, sometimes for very real reasons because of very real experiences. And so, from my perspective, what that means is thinking about, one, how do transitions work? How do we actually, as a society, do better when it comes to transitions?
Yeah.
And that has to have an agenda that involves everything from health and mental health to employment services and labour market programs to, of course, training and education. Now, I think one of the most confronting things as a mature worker is if you've been doing a job for 20 years and you haven't been a student since high school, then being asked to go and do some training. Something that we can do to ameliorate that into the future, if we expect change to be the new normal, is to embed training and education across lives in a genuine lifelong learning way.
There are issues with freeing up people movement and finding different ways to get things done. And I imagine in time that well, you're seeing, I think in some cities now, movements out of cities for that. But equally, this doesn't preclude or prohibit the emergence of regional cities. And I think in terms of the innovation space, this will be clear as a priority for us to encourage this type of activity beyond city borders, to ensure that we see this type of activity provide some sort of anchor point to keep people.
We need to get it rolled out in a more sort of systematic fashion is upskilling our current workforce in schools to be turned on and competent and excited about science, maths and technology, but also I think increasingly making sure it's very much a fundamental part of our Teachers of the Future curriculum in universities right now. Doesn't matter if you think you're going to be a phys ed teacher or a home economics teacher. You can be getting young people excited about science, technology through a whole range of curriculum endeavours, and I think we need to get better at that.
What about from an investment perspective? There's been some concerns that there isn't the level of capital, VC, available in Australia to help fund and promote all the ideas, all the entrepreneurs. Well, Steve Baxter might disagree with that. A man at the vanguard of venture capitalism here in Australia, particularly at the rather risky embryonic stage. He was all about finding value in the digital world, and I was lucky enough to catch up with him.
So we try and get in very early. We invest in these companies. We hopefully give that company a lot more than just money, but experience, time, networks, a whole series of things. So in subsequent investment rounds, we can take investors on at a high valuation. That increases our stake in the value of our stake in that company. It probably will decrease our actual holdings because we'll dilute, but we work on value there. So
you made mention of the expertise. Beyond simply bringing the money, is there a competitive advantage in terms of track record, experience, getting things to market?
One thing I do is I explain my background to people. So I'm not a serial entrepreneur. I'm a plural entrepreneur. I've had 2 businesses. So, and they're in the telecom space, and I've since, Pipe Networks and the previous business, ACS. So I make sure people know that. I have a team, and I make sure people know the value of my team that we bring to that equation. So we bring in analysts, lawyers, financial controllers, all sorts of things. So we bring those other sort of skills and those sort of day-to-day elbow grease type of stuff. You'll find once you stick your face on TV, you can get meetings with anybody. Oh yeah, the race profile definitely helps. So we sit down and understand with our teams, okay, what do you need to go forward? Okay, you need to meet the head of Coles or so-and-so. Okay, let's get you that meeting.
What's the approach from you, from an investment perspective, looking at obviously trying to back some winners? Is it a numbers game? Is it a case of for every 10 small investments I make, maybe 1, 2 will come off? Is that how it's approached?
At the back end it is. I mean, at the back end it has to be a pretty dispassionate numbers game. You know that you think you're pretty good at picking. I don't like using horse racing analogies when it comes to investing. But in essence, at our early stage, we're taking an option. These things will probably blow up, right? And so if you get 10 or 20% of the business, does it really matter? And you want to get value for your investment dollar. But the reality is that you've actually got to incentivise the founders, the people who are going to do the day-to-day work, to stay involved in that business. So taking a little less equity is good in that equation.
Is there a level of gut instinct then? Particularly if you're dealing at such an early stage, the people that you're backing as opposed to simply doing the numbers on what they've been able to show early.
Yeah, look, we've got lots of red flags as well that we've learned over the years. People who want to go from a safe job and be paid another safe wage in a tech startup, that's instant fail. It will kill the business. Lack of inherent tech skills in the founding team will kill the business. So there's if you lie to us once, you're dead to us. You're gone. So we've just seen that of the ones we've had that have failed or not done so well, and lots have failed. We've learnt that from many hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of wasted experience and wasted capital, you might say.
Just finally, for anybody out there who's thinking about giving you a call up to Front Steve Baxter to try and get some investment, number one tip they should do?
Number one tip, prove why you're worth investing in. Go to our website, transitionlevel.com, and contact my team, not me. You won't get angry, Steve, you'll get my very, very capable team. But come to us, prove that you've actually identified a problem that people will actually pay to have solved. So it's a long answer.
Steve Baxter, great as always to talk. Thanks again.
Cheers, James.
Well, that is it for Reimagination 2018, coming to you from the Melbourne Exhibition and Convention Centre. I'm James Dagger-Nixon. Thanks for watching.